Hey everybody, and welcome to Think Big Code Small. When thinking about software delivery, what are the things that really matter to your organization? Is it speed, quality, or maybe just the overall impact to the business? In a 2023 survey of the public, including software engineers, only 22% agreed that prioritizing speed and efficiency as being one of the most important factors when considering computer systems. Instead, the public cared far more about delivering work that is highly reliable at 51%, or ensuring that data is kept safe, 47%, as their top set of priorities. This seems to be in stark contrast to the metrics that are commonly used across engineering for software delivery in general. Google's Dora team focuses on the use of metrics that prioritize speed and efficiency with only a glance at the quality with the metric change failure rate, which really only focuses on build failures and bugs caught in testing. So why is there this push for speed when it seems to contradict what the public actually wants? Well, that's kind of complicated. To build tools and services that are reliable, secure, and just work takes a lot of time and money. For a lot of companies, there's the need to fight off competition, decrease overall costs, and build the types of features that the public actually wants. To do this and stay afloat as a company, you need to be efficient and understand where you can continue to improve. This is where metrics frameworks really start to come into play. The question really becomes, how do you understand the overall direction of your company, product, or engineering team? Well, let's dig into one of the first modern metrics frameworks that continues to grow in popularity, but still seems to be quite misunderstood. So, of course, as you might expect, we're talking about the Dora metrics. Love them or hate them, they're kind of here to stay. So we might as well try and make the best of them, at least as much as we possibly can. So the DevOps Research and Assessment Organization, or Dora for short, the metrics framework they developed was part of a multi-year research project aimed at understanding how to differentiate between high and low performing teams across the software delivery lifecycle. Their research began around 2013 and kind of culminated in the annual State of DevOps report, which has become a major player in the DevOps community to really understand what practices help lead to these high-performing teams. I'm sure this isn't the first time you've ever heard of the Dora metrics, and I'm sure your organization's probably tracking them or at least talked about it. So is this a good thing? Well, yeah, it is. It's great that people are starting to identify ways to improve effectiveness in their overall software delivery, but is this enough? No, not really. These metrics are just not good enough to actually run an organization. But before I go too far down that road, let's talk about what they actually are and why so many people seem to care about them. So first off, what are the Dora metrics? Well, they consist of 4 metrics, including deployment frequency, lead time for change, change failure rate, and time to restore. None of these are really all that complicated to understand and make a lot of sense as metrics to track. But we're not going to dig super deep into these, as there's a ton of videos out there that can describe what the Dora metrics are in a lot more detail. So first, let's start with what's good about the Dora metrics. At their basic level, they're really great directional indicators of how well a team is doing. And they can also be used to help compare kind of team to team, product to product, or even kind of org to org. But in the end, it's really just a report card that doesn't give you enough details into what's actually going wrong across your software delivery lifecycle. So take an example. Say you're in college and you have a B on your report card in your computer science class. What is that really telling you in the end? That you're a little bit better than average? I mean, that's great, but what do you need to do to improve? Where did you excel? It doesn't really tell you any of that. One of the big issues that I have with the Dora metrics is that they're incredibly easy to game. And for anybody that's ever heard of Goodhart's law, you'll be quite familiar with the quote, "Once a measure becomes a target, it no longer becomes a reasonable measure." Should I care about the Dora metrics? Well, yeah, you should. They're good metrics that you should use to track across your organization, but in the end, they're not nearly good enough. Actually, they're not even close if you're truly trying to improve your overall engineering effectiveness or developer experience. So if the Dora metrics aren't good enough, then what about other frameworks like the space metrics? Well, the space metrics were kind of created to help fill in some of the gaps left by the Dora metrics. It's called a framework, But in the end, that's a little bit of a stretch. In my opinion, space is really more of a set of guidelines than an actual framework. But before I dig in too deep, let's talk about what the metrics actually are. So space is a set of metrics that align to each of the letters in the word. So starting with S being satisfaction, I've heard a lot of people also refer to this as sentiment, but it really is looking into how do engineers on a given team feel about the overall process, work to be done, and the overall experience of getting that work done. A lot of this information has to be pulled from quantitative and qualitative surveys, which make it a lot harder to gather than anything else that was in the Dora metrics. The P, or performance, is about measuring the output of the team and the things that they produce, like features, documentation, business impact, or kind of alignment to company goals. The best part about this particular area is that it looks broader than just the software engineering that's writing the code, and includes things like design, product, and the overall prioritization process. The next section, A, is all about tracking activities. And this is where people, especially those talking about developer productivity, like to focus their energy, honestly, because it's easy. This is time tracking, code coverage, deployments, and other kind of software delivery activities that can usually be pulled from corresponding systems. The biggest issue I see is when people want to use these metrics without looking at any of the other areas. This is where a lot of unintended consequences can come from if you're not careful. So let's move on to C, or communication and collaboration. Really looks at the importance of effective communication and collaboration across the team. This includes all aspects like how information is shared, how decisions are made, how teams work together to solve problems. And this is something that really gets overlooked when considering developer experience or team efficiency overall. To put it another way, this is the organizational inertia that a lot of the development community has to fight through just to get their work done. And this leads into the last piece, which is E for efficiency. Efficiency relates to how resources are used to achieve kind of the overall outcomes, aiming to reduce waste and friction and optimize process. This can take a lot of different shapes, which is why it's hard to track. I haven't met a developer yet who wakes up in the morning and says, "Wow, I can't wait to get to all my meetings today." Just when you finally get into a flow state and get interrupted again and again and have to go to a meeting that probably could have just been an email. The space metrics are much more dynamic overall and look at gathering information and how well a team or an organization is operating, but it still has its set of challenges. Like I said earlier, space is far more of a set of guidelines than actual metrics. This can make it quite hard for leaders and organizations to identify the exact metrics to use that align with the overall guidelines. So great. I'll just figure out what the space metrics are and I can go from there, right? Well, I mean, not really. It would be a much better path, but I still don't think it really gets you to where you need to go when it comes to managing an organization or a team really well. The space metrics are really just a part of the picture of what's really happening. I look at these as a base set of metrics that can be used to help manage a team, but there needs to be more. Your metric strategy has to be broken down into many different areas depending on who the audience is. If you're the CTO or CXO, then you're absolutely going to care about the Dora and space metrics, but there's a ton of other metrics that could be really helpful as well. Think about things like business outcome alignment, continuous improvement, engineering satisfaction. These are all directional metrics that could really help understand how things are working and at a lot of different levels. Once you identify some of those hotspots, you'll probably end up passing this down to one of the directors, products, or kind of organizational leaders. They also need things like the Dora and space metrics, but there's an awful lot of other leading indicators that would be very beneficial as well. If you think about things like onboarding time, time lost looking for information, or something as simple as a local environment setup for a developer, and how much waste and friction is felt during the actual process of coding. None of these really fit into the Dora, space, or any other kind of standard metrics that I'm aware of. This is where a really great article put out by my friends at DX, along with the Pragmatic Engineer, talk about how 17 different metrics companies handle their metrics. Almost none of them agreed on a standard set of metrics that could be used to judge how well their organization is working. And that actually makes a lot of sense. This is really due to a few different factors, but one of the biggest is what are you actually optimizing for? I get asked all the time, what is Google or Spotify using for metrics? My answer is always, well, you're not Spotify or you're not Google. So why would you want to use the metrics they have to optimize their organization when you don't really look or act like they do or have the same problems that they do? They have to optimize for massive scale and increase an incredible amount of flexibility inside of their infrastructure that I would bet 6 nickels you really don't have to deal with in almost any way. But one commonality that runs across almost all of these organizations, they have a group dedicated to understanding what metrics can be used to align to company goals, how those metrics can be calculated, and the impact those metrics might have to the organization and the overall culture. This really goes to show there's just no one size fits all or silver bullet that makes this all super easy. It takes great leadership, goal setting, and flexibility to get a good understanding of what's really needed inside of your organization. If you can build a culture that's focused on continuous improvement and gives time and flexibility of teams to be able to constantly improve and use these metrics to help deliver on those goals, that's the best overall solution that will continue to deliver the best outcomes now and well into the future. So what do you think? What metrics frameworks are you using? What have you found to be the most useful? And what is the absolute garbage? Let us know down in the comments. If you made it this far in the video and like our content, we'd also really appreciate it if you'd subscribe and help our channel grow. Thanks for watching.